like to call the Board of Public Works meeting of February 26th to order. Need to ask at this time if anybody is recording the meeting besides Alfred. Seeing none, except the first item on the agenda. Mr. Wilson?
I wasn't here, so you have to make a motion.
Is that
Motion to approve the minutes.
a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting held on February 12th, 2013?
And I'll second that. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Danny wasn't here, so we're good to go. Request for mailbox replacement reimbursement.
Well, I put together a little packet there for you, because I think we need to review a few things. First of all, let me start off by saying we've got a request in for 46 work orders. In other words, allegedly 46 damaged mailboxes by residents saying that snow plows damaged their mailbox. Pages 1 and 2 represent a letter and a bill that we received from a resident on Laurie Lane. As you can see, they did the work themselves, and they're looking for reimbursement for said work. Pages 3 and 4 are from a resident on Rockingham Circle, claiming that their brick mailbox structure was damaged by our snow plowing operations. And you can see they're requesting, they've got an estimate in here for repair work of $750. Page 5 is an email I received from Mark Langone. He had some comments regarding the plowing that was done on Rockingham Circle. And pages 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are just copies of the work orders showing you the locations of the various alleged mailbox damaging. And then following that are a couple of photos each from Laurie Lane and Rockingham Circle. I mean, we've only had 3 plowable snow events this year and 46 requests for damaged mailboxes. I didn't go back through the years, but I think if I did on a much more snowy winter, we'd probably be in the hundreds. Any of us can't find any other community that does this kind of, does what we do, replace mailboxes upon request. I just throw this out there to the board for their consideration, comments, direction, how you want to. I certainly do need some direction on how to go with this one for $750, because
I think we give them a post and a box. That's about all we can do. I mean, that thing is right on the edge of the pavement according to this picture.
Well, it has to be so the mailman can get it.
Right, but, I mean, you put a structure like that up, you're only asking for a problem. Mr. Wilson, you do all the plowing.
So Mark believes it was impossible to hit it in the direction that the road was plowed? Is this the same one that Mark's talking about in his email?
Yep.
And that we pushed the snow to the right, the plow's angle to the right, it kind of fell in the opposite direction. And
So is it possible whoever plows his driveway? Or
I think it might be snow blow, Tom. One of the problem, well, actually one of the things, the issues we have here are all these mailboxes, whether they're specialty mailboxes, wood, metal. There's a metal sleeve under holding up supporting that
I see that in a
structure.
picture now, yeah.
Now, when those things rot,
In this picture, it looks like it's rotted.
the bottoms rot out, and then you know, as soon as snow leans against it, they fall over. They could stand out, you know, wooden ones as well. And as soon as they're down, they call the DPW and we go replace them. And we replace them with a standard type mailbox, which obviously is an issue when someone's gone to a great deal of trouble to make something decorative, or you know.
I can see in this picture where it looks like the pipe is rotted.
Yeah,
It's obvious in his picture that the top of the structure is much heavier than the base that's supporting it, like it was decorative, not absolutely functional.
I would think at least, at the very
Because the
least.
base is smaller than the top,
And
it couldn't support the weight.
The sleeve didn't come up through the middle, up through the structure very high. So it's kind of, it kind of came up like 18 inches or something, and it.
It gives that
It was
appearance.
real top heavy.
Right.
There's no doubt about that. Again, I know that snow pushes a lot of these mailboxes over, and I just don't know how sound they are before there's a little pressure applied to them. I know that the town does knock mailboxes over. I also don't know how many private plowers who are cleaning up the bottom of driveways who are directly responsible for a lot of mailboxes that are down, what they call the throws to replace them.
Because you can see the edge of the guy's driveway right there, and the edge of the road.
So if there's a house across the street, it could be the guy that's doing the work across the street.
Exactly.
And that might explain the direction that it fell. I don't know, John.
I don't either.
It's very difficult for us after the fact to be clear or specific with any of the, unless it's actually run over, which I haven't seen many.
So you guys want more information? Do you want to try and come up with a solution here? You want to take it under advisement?
Can we digest it? And,
Yeah, because you're just hearing about it now.
Right, I mean, I'd like to digest it and have some conversation.
We could take a ride out and take a look at it. too.
Take a ride out and take a look at it.
It's still gonna be there.
Yeah, obviously.
My feeling is, I don't know how you can plow snow, and try and push it back as far as you can off the road to clear it, especially when you know the beginning of the season, more snow piles up, so you have to push it back to make room for the next
That's exactly
snowstorm
right.
to come on. And I know they have to put the mailboxes as close as they can to the street in order for the mailman to reach out of his vehicle, because he doesn't walk it.
I think it's 9 inches back from the edge of the berm.
So,
But you're exactly right.
but, I mean, we're doing our job, and and unfortunately, and you don't know the
So
age
if we want a
of
little,
these things.
if we want a little time, because you're just hearing
Yeah.
about it tonight,
Yeah.
possible solutions include, other towns don't replace them, we don't replace them either anymore. We replace them to some standard of a wooden post with a, standard box, or we replace them no matter what's going on, no matter who did it, or three alternatives, but I don't know if I want to make a knee jerk on 7 minutes worth of conversation, so.
No, and if you look at this picture, it's obvious it
Put it on the next
fell in
month's
the
agenda.
opposite
Table.
direction.
Yeah, so we're gonna table it, think about it,
Yep.
and then at the next meeting, see if we can come up with something that makes sense.
Okay.
I only mentioned three, maybe there's 5 other ideas, but if you can drive out there, take a peek, or think about it, or if you want more clarification from anybody in the office, I'm sure we can. All right, awesome. Memo from Board of Selectmen, Heritage Pond request for public planting.
Yeah, I received this letter from Nick Grohl, with a letter attached from Chris Graziano. He's requesting on May 15th to hold a public, what he calls a public planting at Heritage Park, 10 a.m. He's already called and booked the park for that day and time. I'm really not sure what he's planting at this point, but
So he's not planting there, right? Is he planting there?
That's what it sounded like to me.
Public planting. I don't know enough here if you don't know anymore.
no,
because
I don't know anymore.
We certainly don't want them to just run around here at his park making plantings all over the place. That makes it more difficult for us to mow and maintain
Certainly.
and mulch and everything. So I don't know if this is
Would you like to table this as well until I
Yeah,
find
we
out
need a
more
little-
information?
Come in quick
Yeah,
though,
somebody
right?
meet with Chris.
No, it's in May,
Yeah,
or,
yeah,
yeah, so we
15.
need to table it and get a little more information. Are they talking about planting there, planting around town, planting at your home? Is it educational or is it real or?
Yeah, it doesn't really,
I
does.
mean, I encourage further conversation, but
Sure.
until we know what they're planting and how they're planting. I wouldn't want 63 trees planted in the green space at Heritage Park that we mow around, I don't think, anyway.
Okay.
All right? Excellent. In your package, or do you want to do other business?
Yeah, it's the vehicle thing that I gave you.
So we received an email late this afternoon from
Eric Madison,
Eric Madison.
Chairman of Capital Planning Committee.
Go ahead. They discussed the replacement of our vehicles at length. With that in mind, they just discussed the replacement and where it's going to be paid from. And what they're saying is that they would like to have our position that the water and sewer rates are established to support the cost of these operations. With that in mind, we'd like to recommend funding for both of those trucks from the water and sewer fund and not from the town's general fund.
Mr. Chairman, as
Yes, sir.
the board recalls, initially, the board agreed to fund Truck 15 that way, half
Right.
out of water, half out of sewer. And then we got an email from the Capital Committee requesting the same be done with Truck 49. That was brought before the board, and the board decided at that time to make a switch to around and fund 49 out of the water and sewer and Truck 15 out of the general fund. Now, the request is coming in to fund both of them out of water and sewer. I made you copies of the latest water and sewer fund balances. These are as accurate as I could possibly get them. I think they're pretty much on. And as you can see, without a doubt, we're going to need to raise the water rates,
Well, if we're gonna pay for those 2 trucks out of that
regardless
fund,
of
we're
that.
gonna have to, regardless, raise them, even if we didn't, but we'll have to raise them more because of this.
Thoughts? I mean,
Yeah,
mine
yeah, we're
are,
broke in 2016.
Yeah.
We're negative $100,000 in the
Right.
water account in
Right.
2016. That
I
FY.
mean, to the best of my knowledge, for years and years, equipment's been funded out of capital requests and general fund.
Right.
Through taxation. We did fund a specific piece or two in the last 10 or 15 years because it was really argued that it was a specific piece of equipment for water and sewer. I
Right.
just don't want to open the floodgates that, if we need any additional equipment, we're buying it out of sewer and water and sewer because we're just, instead of taxation, we're going to raise water rates and it's kind of a slippery
It's
slope.
just another way of taxing them.
Exactly. But I don't know what your thoughts are, Dan, so. I mean, it's-
Yeah, 'cause as I recall, most of the stuff that we purchased using that money was directly, a piece of equipment directly related.
Bobcat, a backhoe, or something
Yeah.
that digs trenches.
Or the catch basin
Did you do a
cleaner.
truck before, one truck, or half a truck, or?
I don't know about a truck. The Bobcat purchase that time, that was done out of Chapter 90, if I'm
For
not
highway,
mistaken.
okay.
Or the sewer truck,
Yeah.
the attachment for the jet machine.
All right, for the jet machine, which is a sewer
Just
attachment.
cleaning the sewers,
Right.
or cleaning the storm drain.
And that gets mounted on the truck. That was not the truck.
Correct.
So an argument was made that I think we were intending to agree with the last meeting that part of a truck could be water and sewer, but now we're talking 2 trucks.
Right. I mean, either you're gonna pay it in sewer rates and water rates, or you're gonna pay it in general taxation. What's the difference? I mean, the community's still gonna pay for it. I mean,
The email came in today at 2:50. Is this another one we tabled? Because it's fresh information. I mean, we're being asked to make some pretty quick, big decisions.
it's kind of a lot to digest.
So you want to table this one?
Yeah, and Danny's right, in 2016, we're gonna be negative $100,000.
Right, so the rates are definitely going up without
Right.
the trucks.
Right,
Or with
without
the
the
one
trucks.
truck, right? 49's in here?
49 is in there.
So 49 is represented in these
In there.
numbers that you
Yeah,
see.
Yeah,
And as it is, we'd be 99,000 in the hole in 16, and we'll have 171 in the sewer in 16. So we have to do something for sure with the water rate,
Right.
and now we're being asked to do even more with the water rate. So I guess the night of tabling,
I think so, because I think maybe we can get a chance to talk to
Chairman,
Captain.
my only question
they need
would
to
be,
know by,
well, no, if you table it, I'm not sure what further information I can gather. What further information do you want me to gather?
Well, I think,
Are they gonna be meeting again? Is there something we can go before them and?
That I'd have to find
so that
out.
would be the request. Can we say it was tabled because with the information just coming in 2 hours before the meeting, felt there might be more discussion
Yeah,
needed
we
with
have to
capital
decide,
planning to
you know,
understand.
which way we're gonna go in the future. I mean, if we're gonna be funding all of our equipment, we have to know that because we're gonna have to set our rates accordingly and raise our rates substantially. Something that's never been done before. And if they're not going, if that's the way they want it done, then we'll have to take that into consideration. Otherwise, I'd like to talk to them and to see about, either going back to our
It
original
says, should the board
agreement.
wish to discuss these recommendations, we welcome that opportunity.
Right,
So I
right.
guess that's what we're going to do.
they're giving us the opportunity
Should
to have
I
another
find out what
discussion.
their next meeting
Find out
is
what
and
the next
get
meeting is,
and
and
then
some of us will
we'll go?
get there one way or another.
Right.
If not all of us.
And then maybe a projected water and sewer rate, if we're buying it like
Now,
that?
if you put 15 in here, I guess April's right around the corner, right? We might as well go ahead and do how do we get back out of the hole in
A
16? What
projected
do we gotta do with
sewer
our
and water
rates?
rate, right?
Give me some scenarios.
Right.
Right. We
In
need some
April, we gotta
options.
set rates, right? Yay?
What?
Welcome back.
Yeah, not get much accomplished tonight. We'll get there.
We'll get there.
Was there anything else I
Other
gave you? I
business,
don't
the only
think
one
so.
would be conflict of interest. We all have to do our conflict
Yeah.
of interest thing, so we just need to get that done.
Do that online
Yeah.
Do you have anything else?
or do it at the
I did
senior
not,
center?
but
Those are the
Mr. Fenny
options.
is dying to
He's got
tell you.
something to tell us?
Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
A couple of
Senior center or online?
I'll probably do it online.
Our
I'll
assessor,
probably do it online.
new reception counter is almost complete. Cabinets are in, we're fabricating the countertop over there, so another week or so, that'll be complete. Our LCAP studio project is going along well. The electrical tie-in that took place on February 16th went great, everything worked out. Power was only shut down for an hour or so. Final piece of that puzzle, we're waiting for a transformer to liven up the space, get all the HVAC stuff rolling and balanced and everything else, so we're at that point, like 97% complete. That's the final piece of the puzzle there. I'm almost also working with Don Mackey to purchase cabinets through Lowe's for workstations and classroom setup. We've come up with a preliminary plan. We've spoke with Lowe's. They're on the state contract list now, so we're able to purchase through them. We still have to follow procurement procedures, but we're working on that also. Other than that, we have the municipal space study. Reinhardt Associates has completed their spatial needs survey with all department heads, getting their wish list, moving into the future, obviously, 5, 10, 15 to 20 years, where their staff may be, as well as expanding. Also, currently, we are doing a building assessment team as far as HVAC, plumbing, electrical, fire sprinkler systems. We've assessed all buildings except for High Knoll and the old fire station. So once they finish gathering up all that information, they're going to make some recommendations on how to proceed.
Excellent.
Okay.
Awesome. John, anything for us?
No, we're good.
Good to go? Sean? Good to go? Dave? Good to go? Set the next meeting? 12th?
That's a primary election. Can we have a meeting on a primary
Can't do that
election?
week.
19th, or is that too far? 19th?
It's not too far from me.
Call a special if we need it. What's the 19th?
Yep.
19th? All right, March 19th. 5 o'clock, service building? All right. We're a couple minutes before 5:30 with a little bit of setup, so if we want to go ahead and get the setup going, we can then move into the next thing. You probably pause it while they do the setup. So we're now going to discuss or have a public discussion regarding detention basins. And what we want to do is actually have Tracy from Ty and Bond and Sean take us through a short PowerPoint presentation, I think a little video.
Yep.
And then, so really, it's really go through those first, and then we'll come back to the live camera and we'll continue our verbal discussion and conversation. But Tracy, do you want to, or Sean want to say anything additional before we head into the PowerPoint? Are we going to be talking through the PowerPoint?
Yeah, I'll talk about it, and and then we'll show the video. It's a short video that kind of talks about why we care about stormwater, some of just the ins and outs of stormwater basins, and then I'll pick up again on the slides with some of the maintenance requirements for stormwater basins, and then we'll turn it back over to discussion.
All right, so we will continue to tape it then, that way you'll have the audio behind it, and we'll use it as a public discussion, and I'll try to do my best to moderate so that everybody gets an opportunity to say all the right things or whatever is on your mind in terms of participation, so we don't end up with crosstalk, so that we can keep it somewhat controlled. So if I could, Sean, and you could introduce Tracy and
Sure.
where we're at.
And again, my name is Sean Kelly of the DPW, and just to remind the board, we had been working on for the past 6 years now, a bylaw regarding the maintenance of stormwater basins, both detention and retention. That bylaw was passed at town meeting last year, and then subsequently at the special town meeting, that was repealed. And realizing we still have a responsibility to both the citizens and the environment in East Long Meadow to assure that something is done with maintenance of basins. The first thing we did is decide to put a little educational material together so that people can really have a better understanding of what these basins are. These are not the catch basins that are in front of people's houses, which a lot of people had thought. So these are the larger pond-like structures designed to collect stormwater. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tracy Adamski of Ty and Bond.
Thanks, Sean. And as I said, we'll talk a little bit about maintenance, why this is required, why it's something that the Board of Public Works is interested in. So including, why is maintenance important, who's responsible, what kind of maintenance is required, but we'll also talk a little bit about the stormwater in general, and that's what the video is about. So actually, I'll get into the video first, and then I'll pick up. But the video kind of talks about why is stormwater management important, kind of the connection between stormwater management and water quality. What, erosion, various sediments, pollutants that can come off of stormwater, how stormwater management basins work, and then, like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about the actual maintenance of the basins. And hopefully, it's up as high as it can be.
Clean water. It's important for all of us. From birds to frogs to fish to people. When it rains or snow melts, the stormwater runs off our homes, lawns, driveways, and roads, collecting pollutants, including sediment, litter, pet waste, and nutrients, and sometimes causing erosion and flooding along the way. This stormwater runoff flows to our wetlands, ponds, and streams, where it can harm fish and other aquatic species. One way we minimize pollution and protect property from stormwater runoff is by constructing stormwater basins. So, what is a stormwater basin, you ask? A stormwater basin is an excavated area that stores stormwater for a period of time, thereby delaying the flow of stormwater downstream, both to minimize flooding and erosion and to provide pollution removal. Stormwater basins may or may not have permanent pools of water. Stormwater basins clean stormwater by allowing sediments and pollution attached to those sediments to settle out in the basin, by allowing uptake of pollution through vegetation, and by screening out litter through trash racks. And just as important, stormwater basins protect downstream properties from flooding by holding water during storm events and releasing it slowly. When stormwater basins don't work, they can release large amounts of sediment and water into downstream properties and waterways, and they no longer provide flood control. In East Longmeadow, there are over 50 existing stormwater basins. Here are a few examples. On Fox Hedge Road, Dartmouth Street, and Balmoral Drive. When these basins were constructed, legal agreements were developed to provide for their long-term maintenance. These included homeowners associations and maintenance covenants. As an example, here's a storm drainage and detention basin drainage easement for Prospect Hills Homeowners Association. This easement included an easement for access to 2 storm drainage detention basin drainage easements for the purpose of doing such maintenance of such areas which may be required by the town of East Longmeadow. The Orchard Hill Property Owners Association has a similar requirement in their Declaration of Maintenance Covenant, where all costs and responsibilities for maintenance, repairs, utility services, and beautification of common improvements, which includes the detention basins, is the joint obligation of each of the lot owners. Some developments have an operation and maintenance plan, which specifically identifies responsible parties and what they're responsible for. Here's an example from Nottingham Meadows Association, where the Homeowners Association is named as the responsible party for inspecting and maintaining the extended detention basins and sediment traps on their property. That's about as far as I'll take it on the video, and then we'll pick up again on the PowerPoint presentation. So that just provided a brief introduction to what's going on with respect to stormwater basins in town. Some of that's just general information with respect to why stormwater basins are typically constructed on properties, and that there are legal, in East Longmeadow isn't rare in this, where there are legal agreements for homeowners associations and operation and maintenance plans that are put into place when developments are done that identifies responsibilities for them. Back to stormwater basin basics, and again, I think this kind of goes back to Sean's initial point that a lot of people were thinking stormwater basins and catch basins. So catch basins are generally part of the stormwater system, but East Longmeadow has picked those up. So they do the maintenance for the catch basins and the pipes that are in the streets. But a stormwater basin is typically, again, some type of depression. It includes an embankment that slopes down to the pond and the store, which provides some sort of storage area. Oftentimes, there's a forebay where the water comes in. That's in I'll say a pooling area where water velocities drop and a lot of the pollutants and sediments settle out there. There's typically an outlet control structure that allows flows to come over. Once the height of the basin gets to a certain point, so that it doesn't compromise the structure of the basin itself, as well as an emergency spillway.
So taking each piece of it, again, oftentimes on a yearly basis, the maintenance of the basins really doesn't take a whole lot of effort. It takes some, there's definitely work that needs to be done. It's just that over time, if they're not maintained, then a lot of, then more maintenance is needed to bring it back up to the design. So for the embankment, maintenance is generally mowing and maintaining the vegetation that's around it, removing litter, reseeding as needed, controlling any erosion that's happening, and if there happens to be any fences or gates around, if it happens to be like a permanent pool of water, then there's likely a fence or a gate, and those would need to be inspected and repaired. And the whole purpose there is to maintain the integrity of the slopes that are coming down into the basin. The storage area, again, this is the pond area where the water is allowed to store, and that includes both the forebay and any permanent pool or any pooling area of water. And the maintenance there, again, is inspection and removal of litter, checking for sediments, and potentially dredging. Oftentimes, if the forebay is maintained, that's a lot easier to maintain because it's a smaller area. It's meant to capture the majority of the sediments. If that's maintained, the life of the rest of the pond is much longer because the sediments are being taken out in the forebay, and less dredging has to occur within the rest of the pond area. And then I mentioned debris barriers. So those could include like trash racks, which are racks that just prevent larger debris from going into the system. And then there's usually an outlet control structure and an outlet pipe, and those need to be inspected and made sure that again, if there's litter or debris that has piled up against that needs to be removed. If there's any equipment that has been damaged, it needs to be repaired. Check for blockages. So if there's something that's has lodged in there, that can be removed so that it doesn't otherwise compromise the basin. And then removing debris or silt buildup that occurs at the outfall. And yes, these are kind of my words, but why is the DPW, why is the Board of Public Works kind of caring about this? Right now, the maintenance of these basins is on the individual property owners or homeowners association. The town does have some requirements from EPA to manage stormwater that's entering into their system. There may be some outfall sampling that the town may have to do in future permits that are coming down the line that might have the town have to kind of go up the system and identify where there might be pollution and influences coming into the municipal system. The basins are really designed to protect property and people. They're designed to withhold flooding, and they're designed to provide water quality enhancements. So those are important pieces of the basins and their initial design, and in order for them to continue to work as they're designed, proper maintenance is needed. So, and that kind of goes down to the last bullet, that poorly maintained basins, regardless of what they're designed, they lose their ability to control flooding and prevent pollution. And I think that's probably the key point here for the board. And with that, I know there's a lot of discussion that can happen on this topic. So I think I'm happy to answer any questions and to help with the discussion.
Thank you very much. That was very good. So just to kind of put out a couple of comments, the Board of Public Works obviously has a keen interest in what's going on with retention detention basins, with catch basins, and with the overall quality of our water and how it's cared for in these areas. I know a couple of years ago we put together the bylaw that was brought forward. That was our best effort to put something together that would actually work. it went through, but then I guess upon review, it was then repealed at the following and subsequent town meeting. So the bottom line would be, at this point, we're almost back to square one, with the exception being, it has been voted on that the Board of Public Works is not to go into the detention basins, and we are not to, undertake anything in that area. So for the time being, I guess it's probably a understanding on our part, and perhaps a restudy of the situation where, at this point, it's really a civil situation between homeowners associations and properties that get flooded. Issues that the DEP or EPA or anybody might come forward with, the town of East Long Meadow pretty much has its hands tied to be able to go onto that property near those retention or detention basins to perform any work, because we can't perform work on private property. So, we're open to any and all ideas, keeping in mind that the subdivisions were developed by builders or developers, neighbors that wanted to commingle in a neighborhood. And in that effort, either through the builder or through the people who were first buying the homes, in order to get the layout that they wanted, with the houses that they wanted, with the street structure that would not allow water to go through, or the roof structure that would not allow water to go through any longer, we had to figure out a way that they could build what they built and not affect all the other things that are part of the requirement of building surfaces that don't allow the water to do what it naturally did in the woods or in the fields. So, at this point, we're open to ideas as to how we are going to move forward, knowing that when those projects were brought forward, the homeowners and or associations and or builders said to the town of East Long Meadow, to all the taxpayers, don't worry, you won't have to incur any additional costs for what we want to do to build our neighborhood. We will maintain the detention basins within our own personal property, associations, or the builder, and however that responsibility went. I know there's been various different types of agreements. I know the planning board and others work diligently with town council to figure out what might work or what might not work. The story, though, continues that it wasn't going to be a burden to the taxpayers, other than those who signed on to those commingled developments. That being said, we're open to ideas. I think the Board of Public Works is open to ideas, perhaps from people that are attending this meeting. And further, we're not going to make any decisions tonight, to the best of my knowledge, but what kind of ideas might be able to be brought forward. Other than our original proposal, we have had some conversations and are willing to perhaps come somewhere between what our original proposal was and today, but we'd like to hear some input and understand what we possibly could do.
John.
Yes, sir.
Peter Kokotis, 32 Sutton Place. Nice presentation. Before we get into the ideas, I just wanted to make a very small, minor detail of clarification. I believe it was the spring of 2009 that the Conservation Commission did have access to all the retention basins, and they were about to embark on a inspection, and I believe they're trying to do X amount of inspection. So, not to get hung up on that point, but the town did have access at one point, and I would believe it's still the same way. Just a point.
Okay, we can possibly address them as we go, or
Sure.
after, it depends.
I just wanted to balance that because, I did research the Conservation Commission meeting minutes, and that's what I did discover.
Well, I would say that a lot of these detention basins, stormwater ponds, were probably constructed with the Conservation Commission permit in the order of conditions. But I think that's different than having the DPW actually go on to the property and do any maintenance activities on those basins.
Right. I mean, it's still the access issue, so they did have access. And I'll just say that.
But I'll also say that I think that might be accessed specifically for the Concom through the order of conditions permit.
Okay.
I don't think there's many basins where there's not actually formal deeded access, so there's not like an actual easement allowing, it might be through somebody's property, or there might be a basin like behind somebody's house, that there may not be a specific easement that allows the town to go across that property.
So a follow-up question would be, is it the board's plans to recycle the same bylaw that was repealed at the annual town meeting?
I don't think so. I think at this point, it's have some meetings and see what people have for public input, and then discuss further, as many meetings as it may take. But no, there's really no reason, I don't believe, in talking, within the department, there's no reason for us to be crazily aggressive to go back and do the same thing we did before, only to have it repealed again. At this point, in a restudy of it, if you will, we don't have any obligation. It's civil homeowner association versus whoever downstream gets flooded or whoever downstream has contaminants. It's going to go back to the homeowner or the association to settle up with those situations, because the town right now has no ability. We were trying to put forward an ability for us to go into those and work with them. Right now, we have no ability to do that, so how could it possibly be our responsibility? Not only did we not have an intention to try and do that, we had the intention to do it and it was repealed. So we actually tried to go in and help, and now taxpayers said stay out. So that's where we're at.
Yes, and if, Mr. Chairman, you don't
Yes,
mind
sir.
just
No, I don't
clarifying that.
We're here for ideas, though.
Okay,
That's the
thank
purpose
you.
of
Yes.
tonight's meeting.
It was the cost. I mean, we understand that Clean Water Act compliance, everyone gets that. It was the cost issue. And I believe, one other point I just wanted to bring up, internally, you have a deadline within the town for the warrant article. So my first question and concern is the lead time that we have as residents. If we need to pull any kind of a warrant article together, we can quickly pull 10 signatures together before March 1st, which is Friday. So, my question is, for transparency, I mean, do you plan to submit something, before your internal deadline?
There has been no formal discussion as a board to submit anything before the deadline for this year. So, right, wrong, or indifferent.
Okay, so,
I'd just like to say that, we started several months ago just to reopen this issue, and we asked Sean and Tracy to start the process going so we can at least have some meetings with the public in hopes to keep this thing going, because at some point in time, this article has to be, bylaw has to be put in place in order to protect the residents of East Long Meadow, so.
Donnie.
Don Anderson, 22 Skyline. Basically, some of the citizens decided after I retired to get involved in this matter. I was able to step back as a former town official, and just to give you a little bit of history on this, then I'll continue with my point. I was one of the youngest elected officials in town history back in 1988. I got my papers as a 29-year-old, and one of the first subdivisions I saw, I questioned, and I said, these associations are stupid ideas. And I said, people are not going to associate. And if you create this legal entity, I even asked the petitioner, I asked town council at the time and said, what happens if people don't associate? What happens if you create an entity through the Secretary of State's office and fail to file annual fees and dues? Where does this property end up going? And they said, well, it becomes abandoned, it's not owned, there's no entity, and so forth. I said, why are we doing this? Well, Conservation didn't want to get involved, DPW at the time did not want to get involved. They're going, yep, you're a petitioner, you're a developer, your problem, we don't want to deal with it. And I said, this is ill-advised. This is not going to work, because people generally don't associate with each other. They may associate with people they want to choose, but let alone creating a forced condominium association is not going to work. And I said that back in 1988, and that was when Reagan was president. And I still continue to say that, but I was told by town council, in no uncertain terms, it's legal, let it happen, let it run its course. And so I had to put my hands up, still voicing my disapproval. You can talk to Robin to this day. Even as I left the planning board when I retired 2 years ago, I said, these associations are ill-advised, they're never going to work, it's not going to happen. So when people like Peter and others asked me to get involved because We have a little bit of history of trying to mediate matters, like when we had the Ellsba matter a couple of years ago, where the first version bylaw, when a number of people showed up to stack the meeting, and that bylaw had so many mistakes in it, where our town's zoning would have been, I could have built businesses, physical businesses, on my street and your street and anyone else where the land was there, and put signs up to 4 feet, and we said, no, let's work with them. And there were still people that says, no, we're not going to have any home-based business, it's wrong. And I said, no. The people have spoken, let's try to put it together. So my job was, and I'm not being hired, I'm doing this as, totally as a volunteer, and also to try to, because the point I had, again, from the 1980s, I still carry to this day, was what can we do? What were the reasons of this whole problem? Well, obviously, groundwater, and this affects us all. It's not a simple matter of a utility. It's something that what one person does at one street, or what nature does, heavy rain stuff, influences tributaries of the Mill River, it affects everything. So the responsibility is to have something to take care of it. That this experiment for 25 years of having developers or associations take care of it is failed, and no matter how much you want to legislate it, it's not going to work. So why did the townspeople at the second meeting turn it down? Well, looking at it, and basically it was for one reason. It was they didn't want the government to come by and say, $1,000 fine to you. There was no commentary that the work that the DPW put together was not something that benefited the town. So what I tried to do is, people say, let's put a new bylaw together. We don't need a new bylaw. The bylaw that you guys put together is perfect. The reason it was turned down was because of the money situation. So I've done some research in the past, and even today, I've reached out to the town moderator, I've talked to others as well, and said, and talked to concerned parties, including Peter, and said, let's find a way to blend the two. And I think we've come to a conclusion. We had a meeting this afternoon with Dave and Sean, and Tom was able to happen to be in the area. He stopped in just for a few minutes as well, just to get the issues out. And I think I can speak on behalf of the people that spoke out against it and voted against it, that this time around, if we had something where we had an amount, even if it meant an increase, say $50,000 a year budget item, doesn't have to be within the budget, it's an add-on, and have the townspeople vote for it on an annual basis, and then create a methodology where we can have a standard access, or what's that term you guys use? It's not an easement, but it's a way to get onto a property. It's not right away, it was another term that you used.
Right of entry.
Right of entry. Maybe we can look at that and have discussions and move it forward. Don't reinvent. You guys drew up a very good bylaw. It was the money that was the problem. It was forcing legislative people to affect us to associate, which I said was wrong then, it's wrong now, it isn't going to work. You can't, we are the town of East Long Meadow. We're not the village of Nottingham. We're not the village of Prospect Hills. That's nonsense. You can create it, developers can speak and say how wonderful, and the people in Whoville will get together and do it. It's not happening. It hasn't happened in a quarter of a century. It's not going to happen. So I think the reality at the end of the day is, let's look out for the town of East Long Meadow and realize that the impact on our stormwater system affects all of us. Just like if a pumping station broke down on this end of East Long Meadow, by right, everyone pays for it, including that end of East Long Meadow, because we're the town of East Long Meadow. So I think I've been able to decipher, I hope, and I think you agree?
I agree.
That the reason is not because we don't want you on our property, you trespassers. It's the forced association that never, ever, ever should have been in place. But it's in place, and it should be. Now we have to do the damage control. I suggest future subdivisions. I have some ideas of what to do in the future, but that's neither here nor there. Now we're dealing with what we have to work with. So let's not reinvent this good bylaw that you guys drew up. Let's just take care of the financial part. and work it on a phased basis. And I believe with highest degree of confidence we can get this passed. We can come up with some strategies to create the legalese and legalize, as you say, to get people on the property legally and be able to come up and get the people of the town to embrace, endorse, and realize this is something that benefits all of us, whether you live in a subdivision or whether you live on Elm Street and not in a subdivision. It doesn't matter. It's the town of East Long Meadow that benefits from this. Thank you.
Thank you. So, 2 quick questions. One of them might not be appropriate, but I wanted to ask it anyway. So, did you vote no on every subdivision that had a detention basin?
I spoke my opinion in the beginning.
And voted yes or no?
I voted a yes with the word that I don't agree with this.
All right.
But I was told, town council, that I could not, the subdivision had to be approved. I was told if you complied with all the subdivision rule requirements. If I voted no, when I'm told by town council that I was in error, okay, then I'm opening the town up to litigation. And when the person could say, yes, we complied with every East Long Meadow subdivision control requirement, we complied with the recommendations of the DPW, we posted the bonds, we've done all this. So I was not in a position, but my opinion is very well known.
Okay. So, that being said, I mean, I've been several years and been involved in several planning board iterations of legalese and legalize. One's going to be like this. No, it's all going to be on this property. No, it's going to be in this subdivision. No, we're going to create this. I watched some of them implode, explode, disappear, etc. The long and the short is that those subdivisions were approved and only approved because they were able to demonstrate a retention or detention basin. So, moving forward, I hear what you're saying and I respect it, but we do have to consider future subdivisions.
Well, then I think
because now what I understand, let me finish if I can, because now what I understand is there's even a talk about underground structures. So there won't be detention basins. I think there's actually one that's on the books right now being talked about. Where does it start? Where does it end? What's the legal E? What's the legal I? And here we go again, Don. Whether we agree or don't agree,
what I prefer,
we've got future subdivisions that are going to come forward. And I could say to them, correct me if I'm wrong with your experience, I could say, you know what? No more detention basins in East Long Meadow. Because you're going to build on that 7, 12, or 22 acres without a detention basin, correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not the planning board or the environmental expert, you can build 2 homes and a driveway X wide by this long, and that'll still leave enough area for the water to do its thing. But if you want to build 13 homes, you're going to need a retention or a detention basin. To me, that means that we are taking single moms, elderly, fixed income, and the rest of our taxpayers in town, and we're saying, it's okay, we're a community, and because you want to build 8, 12, or a dozen homes on that, what used to be open space, it's okay, because now we're going to pay for going forward.
Typically,
I'm trying to understand that.
Typically, the extra lot, singular, that was in a subdivision, that the basin allowed for maybe 1, maybe 2, not 2 to 15 or something like that. It was usually squeezing 1 extra lot or so.
Right. So if we move forward and say there's no more detention basins, everybody's going to be happy, right?
That's not my point. What I would suggest for future, whether if I was on DPW or the board, is I would have as part of my cash bonding requirements, a larger fund to say forecast 10 years worth of maintenance on there, and have that set permanently in an interest-bearing account to the town of East Long Meadow to fund it in the future.
So to kick it off, we're going to ask the 50 that are already in place to kick something in to kick this fund off.
No,
all right. Well, what were you talking about? How we're going to pay for this?
Basically, what I was going to suggest is a figure, say for the sake of discussion, and again, this is what I'll say, $50,000 a year. Add that in there. Which would
into where? From the single mom and the elderly and the rest of the residents.
And from everyone in East Long Meadow.
Okay.
Because we can start talking about the single moms and everyone in East Long Meadow, because that is an important part of the entire community. The fact is, when my 2 kids went to school in East Long Meadow, even though I'm paying $7,000 a year, I benefited financially because of what it costs per student. Now that both of my kids we're empty nesters, we're still paying that amount. So we are all helping everyone. We're helping the single moms of the world. Because that type of approach of saying, how do I benefit from this, is not, because everyone, they said, benefits from clean water and clean. We're trying to take care of, fix a situation that if I had my way back in the 80s, we would have had a more aggressive bond, we would have had a more situation, where it would have been hopefully the interest on it would have kept feeding itself. But that wasn't it. They believed in this idea of the association. And in my opinion, I think history speaks for itself, it didn't work. But I think everyone benefits. I'm helping the single mom, and as if we're paying taxes so that person's child can enjoy the East Long Meadow school system. We all help each other out. And we're looking at, what, 50 retention basins, and is that the figure I heard from Ty and Bond?
It's slightly over 50.
Slightly over 50. If we take a figure, say, and I'm throwing this out, remember, this is a work discussion, I'm saying $50,000, all right? Which, again, add that as an additional tax, $50,000 over the town, and so forth. Let's say it costs $1,000 to mow the lawn in each one. Let's say it costs, we can't handle all 50, we can do 10 at a time. That's $5,000 per. That's so forth. Just a thought to get it out there and get it done right. Not get it done by somebody who's forced to create an association and tries to find who can be the lowest bidder on this project, who can take care of this, who can do a cheaper job than doing. We don't want that. We want it done right. As she demonstrated with this presentation, we all benefit from this. So let's benefit the single mom with better, water conditions in East Long Meadow. Let's benefit everyone so that everyone can go and enjoy our waterways, our tributaries, and make the town the way it really should be. So I think it's still time we can fix it, but that doesn't mean we have to continue making the problem in the future. We're not talking big bucks in the scheme of things. We're talking about doing it the right way and trying to come up with some strategies, cooperative between town boards and the citizens to, at the end of the day, do it right.
I don't want to continue to just dominate, but I have a bunch of thoughts. So.
Yeah, no, I understand where you're coming from, but I also know that, you were one member on the board of the planning board for a good number of years, and, the policy was adopted and is continue to be in place that if a subdivision is built, that there will be a retention pond put on there to handle the stormwater. And to this day, it still remains that it's the obligation of the homeowners in that subdivision to be responsible for the maintenance of the retention basin. It's still in place today.
I'm just saying it's still wrong.
That's one person's opinion, but the rest of the board has disagreed with you. It would be just like, going to the condo association, the one condo that we have in town, that says when they came in and they put their presentation, they said, we're going to pay our taxes, but the town will not have to pay for snow plowing in that subdivision or in their development. They will not have to pay for trash. These are all the things that they agreed to. They said to the town that they will do, assume the responsibility for allowing this to be developed. It's the same scenario.
Yeah, well,
is that when the builder comes in for a subdivision and says, I'd like to build 25 homes in there, and the town has this list of contingencies that they must comply with in order for them to get permission to start building, that is still in place today, that they have to maintain it. And, it's unfortunate that the people that bought into there don't understand it, didn't understand it when they bought it, or what. But it hasn't been done, and these are, in a lot of them, and the longer you put off these things up, the worse condition they're going to be, and the more expensive it's going to be to maintain and get back into a normal standard that can be easily maintained. A lot of these are very simple. We don't have a lot of them that have a lot of problems. The bylaw that we passed, that we tried to get the right of entry in, was to help the homeowners of this subdivision so we could come in with no charge to assess what the condition is and to help advise and work with these the people of the subdivision of what has to be done. So we could help them draw up some type of a maintenance program for them, work with them. That was our intent. Our intent was not to fine anybody or do anything else. It was initially just to go on and say, listen, and we want to make you aware that in your bylaw, in your deed, it says you will maintain the sketch detention basins and retention basins, and we've looked at it. This is what needs to be done. This is a minimum standard. Now, you know, some of them are simple, just a simple removing the trash, as she showed, and mowing the area so keep any type of brush or trees or from growing. So it's just a nice grassy area there. That's all it takes. And so people in the subdivision will say, okay, we've got to get together. The DPW has sort of outlined a maintenance program. You know, does somebody want to take it on? Just like a regular homeowner association. It doesn't have to be a formal one that they have to file with the Secretary of States every year and have a formal one. It can be a very informal one and say, listen, you know, this is what has to be done. The cost is going to be $2,000 a year to maintain, and it's going to cost each of us $50 a year. So everybody agrees to put in the $50 and maintain it, and that's the obligation that the people in the subdivision made when they signed the deed and took title to the property. We're not looking to penalize anyone. We're not to fine anyone. We're trying to work with them to make sure that this is done, and people are aware of it. And more of awareness program, and to try and help them get the thing going. If there's a big one, a major problem, you know, then, you know, something else has to be done, and you have to look at a different avenue. But at least you know what we've got. We were going to go on and look at all 50 of them, not at 1 month or 2 months, but over a period of time, and just identify the issues and bring it to the homeowners of the subdivision's attention.
Again, the reality is, I mean, condominiums are separate from these type of associations. I mean, right off the bat, they're created under a specific law, Chapter 183, and it's a different set. You have to have operating capital, and you know, everything. It's set up differently. These associations are set up for one reason alone, not to be able to maintain common areas. They were created to maintain a retention basin. And history has demonstrated for 2.5 decades, if not longer, that despite the requirement for people to associate, they don't associate. It's tough to legislate association when, in people's mind, when they're buying into a subdivision, notwithstanding, you know, you have to be you have to associate. The reality is, for a quarter century, people have not and continue not to associate. They're not thinking they're buying into a condominium. They think they're buying into single-family houses on a set of streets or cul-de-sac or what have you. So, whereas with people, the mindset of a condominium is, I got somebody to pay to mow my lawn. I got somebody to pay to to plow my driveway. I got something. They got services. I got to pay for common insurance. I got to pay for common street lighting and so forth. So, in their mind, is one of the first things I can hear people say when they buy a condo is, "Oh, thank God, I don't have to mow my lawn anymore. I don't have to do that." That's what they're paying the money.
So I think we get it. The question I would have for you is, it's in the deed. The lawyers move that information at closing, right?
The point of the matter
is,
just
a question.
Explain it to people. You can tell people you have to associate, and the reality is they're not associating.
I understand that, but it's in the deed. The realtor, the lawyer, they pass that information on. It should be known, right?
You can put a rule that says, hang out with your neighbors. You're supposed to hang out with your neighbors.
Right.
Yeah, Don, go ahead. You know,
so, question for you. Yeah. Pete, you want to say? Yeah, Peter.
Go ahead, finish your thought.
So my question for you is, put the bylaw back in just the way it was, and go to appropriations. You want us to go to the appropriations.
Remember, we're talking, this is the first of many meetings.
I know, I'm just trying to get it.
Yep.
So in case I'm misunderstanding what any of this is bringing us to, it's original bylaw, go to appropriations and say some of the go-forward ideas included $50,000 a year for detention basin maintenance.
Yes.
Will you guys add that to our budget and therefore put it through for taxation?
Sounds fine.
Anything else?
Is
Any other ideas? Any other thoughts? Any other
Well, that's where we're having, ideas may come to us because of, what we're experiencing and learning and everything. This is the first of hopefully many, so that we can have something
Okay.
at the town that'll pass the town meeting.
All right, Peter?
Yeah, just some quick points.
Yep.
And I thank you for
Yep.
summarizing what Don's proposing. Regarding some of the condo associations, I'm sure there's probably an abatement that's built in because there's an offset. Just a comment on that. The 2012 baseline, there were 51 residentials. There were 8 non-residential, and then 4 town-owned, and at that time, there was 63 total. Then it's my understanding there's about 6 or 8 more commercial or exempt that are not subject to the Clean Water Act. So there's a significant amount of retention basins in the town. And the other thing is, some of the older homeowners associations, the restrictive covenants, they run with the land as a 30-year period. I mean, these associations, if they ever became active, they could just vote the whole maintenance clause right out of the agreement. So, like in Porter Woods, we have 1.7 acres of the huge retention pond, and that's maintained by our neighborhood. We do an annual cleanup, and I realize the scope of some of the others are more difficult because they're not easily accessed. And I just would like to say, with Don's proposal, whatever that dollar amount is, there has to be a priority list that would at least do, like, the easy ones, fast track the easy ones. If they're more difficult, let's say, access and there's obstacles, then you prioritize and phase them in to the next years. And regarding, and this kind of came up last year, John, I think we're kind of beyond that, and I'm not just rehashing this, but the worst thing that we could do is divide the town and to use, economic circumstances based on the family demographics. I think we're all professionals here, and I think that wouldn't be productive for us to do that, because you heard me say that, yeah, we're paying for the street lights, and we don't have street lights in Porter Woods, and there's the map there, there's no street lights. So we all contribute to the town, and I would propose that on a $50,000 estimate to baseline the degree of work that needs to be done, the scope of work that needs to be done town-wide. That's a good start. And if you're looking at appropriations, under the Proposition 2.5, our town is in the $1 billion plus taxable income. So if you take all our properties, it sums way over 1-point-something billion. I think it might be 1.1, maybe 1.24 as it grows. So when you look at $50,000 amortized over the tax base, some people would call that decimal dust, and I'm not trying to downplay the seriousness of other budget items that every department struggles to get maybe a $5,000 line item with appropriations. I understand that, I've been attending appropriations, but if this is compliance, as you know, appropriations goes through each department, asks if it's unfunded mandates or whatever. This would be one of those that, if it's compliance with the Clean Water Act, that would be truly justified as the tax base. Because in the big picture of things, all of our property values need to go up. And whether you're in a subdivision or an older neighborhood, it doesn't matter. We all love this town. So as we all contribute to the goodness and the quality of life, I think we will all benefit. So I thank you.
Great comments. I can't quite let go of the demographics, because as an elected official, as I tour senior centers and schools in different parts of town, I do hear the comment, and I'm sure my fellow board members might agree, about taxation and about what the town of East Long Meadow and the taxes, and it's nice that we have these big new houses and these big new subdivisions, but what about me? So I just have to say, Peter, I agree, I love your comments, but the real world as I walk around, people are even a little bit afraid of me sometimes, because I think they're putting me in a place where they're afraid I'm going to spend their money. I'm not trying to do that at all. I'm trying to make sure everybody understands how things were set up. A couple questions. The original bylaw gave us right of access or egress through whose property? there's 7 neighbors around the retention pond. Which neighbor's gonna let us through?
Well, that's something we.
Is the association gonna help us with that, or are we now on our
Well,
own, neighbor by neighbor?
Here's the key, John. It's going to be, it depends. Some of the early subdivisions we had, and we have to check with the assessor's office.
But they're all gone, done. At 30 years, they're gonna be dissolved, or they don't
Okay.
exist. Now you're saying ton of East Long Meadow, take care of that retention basin in the middle of 7 neighbors.
Yeah, but
Who's gonna say, oh, drive that D8 right through here?
John,
Come on down, bring in the bobcats and the bucket
Sure.
loaders.
typically, there's a pipe that's feeding it, whether it's
Through somebody's yard.
through somebody's
That
yard. So
person all set with
there's
us doing
already,
Yeah.
there should be some type of an easement in place
He's telling me
where
they're
that
not.
pipe is.
What we should do.
There should be,
There should be,
oftentimes
but here's the
there's
thing.
not on the
Right,
early
there
But
should
that's
be,
gonna- could be one
but
of the
oftentimes they're not.
conditions
All right,
of
so that's
the
for a
town
future
taking-
meeting, we all gotta be thinking.
Exactly, we have to talk
what I
about-
want to say is, I don't think we want to make a knee-jerk reaction and fast-track one over faster than another, like Pete suggested. I think we need to rewrite the whole thing, so we're not revisiting this thing in 25 years. We need to address what's going to happen in the future subdivisions.
Make it more comprehensive.
I don't know
Well,
what,
that's what you and I know, we said it every time this came up. For the
Well,
past 18 years that I've been involved, every time there was a retention,
Right.
detention, conservation, Board of Public Works, Planning Board conversation, we had lawyers and people looking at it, and we're gonna write this one this way this time, and we're gonna write it that way the next time, and we're gonna write it a third way the fourth
All I
time.
can
How many
say is
iterations
if
do we
can
have?
put a timeline to have it at the special town meeting in the fall, and
Yeah,
set.
there's no urgency on our part.
And set meetings with each other, and have working meetings,
I think we have to, because I'm just bringing up one question, right, which is a pretty good question.
then let's.
Through whose backyard are we
We
going?
have we have emails of each other, we know how to reach each other. We can even, I don't know if Sean wants to be the point guy or something, he could schedule other meetings.
He's dying to be the point guy.
Then he
he lives for that.
All right, absolutely. All right, so we can. then
All right, I
make-
agree. Another
make it
question,
happen.
I just want to throw out some working questions if I can. So the neighbors that are already doing a good job for us, do we really just want to say you don't have to do that anymore, and now we assume the responsibility and the maintenance for all of those? Or there's a lot of schools where a lot of parents, you brought up schools before, where they volunteer their time so that the schools don't have to invest more money. There's lots of places in town where volunteerism certainly helps keep the cost of living in East Long Meadow down.
Well, let's put that.
Is there a way to incorporate the ones that are already kind of doing it? Let's keep doing it. We're only here as a fall-safe, fall-back.
Let's
You
let's put that on there, and we can look into that in terms of dealing with appropriations and budgetary concerns and so forth, and find.
Because we may shift an unnecessary burden just by saying we're going to put a bylaw through that says residents don't have to do it anymore. We've got this special fund, and DPW is going to take care of it. Everybody else stops, and now all of a sudden we
And
shift.
One of the things we should have,
$50,000
though,
might not
is have,
be the
so
budget
make sure
number.
that the work that's being done by the residents is done satisfactory to either conservation or tie and bond.
Right.
So if they say, that's nice, but you're kind of like, you're just touching the surface, it really needs this.
Mhm.
So I think that's something that needs
For
to be
future
discussed.
discussion.
Right.
Good.
Pete, you were going to say something?
Yeah, John, I was gonna mention, out of the kindness and the generosity of your board, you did a trial run, I'll call it that, of Porter Woods.
Mhm.
And that would be like midlife, or maybe a third into the life of it. So I think it was around 2002 that the town did that service. And now, if you do a Google or even a Zillow, you're gonna get this plot here, and you can see the vegetation that just slowly grows. And I'm proposing that once these are caught up on, first of all, do an assessment. What are the priorities? I would be looking at priorities that are dealing with Clean Water Act compliance,
Mhm.
but the town needs a comprehensive plan and responsibility in the compliance with all that. So I'm saying the town should just do all the retention basins. We're doing some of the, let's say, volunteer work on the light duty things, It's not like we're gonna open our garage and drive a retention basin mower that you buy at Acres. It doesn't exist, because these are heavy-duty equipment operations where the town has that money, has the equipment that we've already paid, again, in investment through capital, through overrides, whatever it is. You have the equipment right here. Whether it's idle or not, anyone can argue that, but the equipment is here as well for the town. And I understand the resources and the deployment of the labor force and all that. It's a balance, but if you do it with a systematic approach, and at least baseline that first 1 or 2 years, even if we don't get the 50,000 approved, why can't we just do that? Because you need the baseline, what the actual scope of this is going to be.
Because right now, I believe, we can't, Board of Public Works can't just go ripping in there. Go ahead.
If I can make just a little bit of clarification, and these are just some generalities, I'm not going to get into specifics, but for conversation, we'll say there's just a little bit over 60 as far as
Detention basins?
homeowner, private, residential type detention basins,
Okay.
not looking at municipal or schools. Of that, there are approximately 712 residences that are directly affected by that detention basin. If you generalize, again, it's very hard to come up with an exact figure of how many residences are in town, but it's somewhere around 8.5% of total residences in town. I know for tax purposes, we also include businesses and whatnot. As far as the detention basins or basins themselves, some of them are on one lot, which might be owned by one homeowner. Some of them are on multiple lots owned by multiple homeowners. And some of them are on lots that are actually owned by a homeowners association and taxed accordingly. As far as the associations, there's only, to my knowledge, 2 that I can think of that I'll say are active. One is up at the one we've talked about at Evergreen area, Fox Edge. The other one is Nottingham. The one at Nottingham, the basins are on private property. They do collect a common charge from all the owners, because in addition to the detention basins, they also have a landscaped entrance. They actually have a water account, because there's a water meter. They irrigate it for the flowers.
Right.
So they're actually paying in more than just the stormwater. So it's very varied. As far as anything, as far as access, it doesn't matter whether it's older or more recent. Almost every single one is different. Some of them are, I'll say, good in the sense that the town currently has the right to get in there and inspect or theoretically repair if we were to do so. Some of them, the intent was there, but there was never an easement document. There might be an easement shown on a plan of land that was recorded, so you'd think there is an easement there, but there was never a recorded easement. Some of them don't have even that much on them, so it's very varied. The way we wrote the bylaw that was formally passed is it just said that the DPW or its designees may enter the property to inspect, and that was the start of it. So it just gave us the intent, the right to go in there, and I think it would be under our professional judgment how to access the property, whether it's through a driveway or walking in initially or whatnot. So it's very varied. In regard to the condition of the basins, the majority of them are not visible from the street. So I can be honest in saying that I don't think any of the staff, or myself included, know the condition of them. I can name you several that have trees growing up that you can see. Some of them are very visible, again, like the Evergreen one, but there's 2 at Evergreen. One of them is on the association's property, and that's the one you referred to that we did a little bit of work years ago, but the association or some type of an association does maintenance work in the sense of trimming the bushes that surround it, and there's a gate and it's mowed. But there's also another basin within that subdivision that I have never seen because it's on private property. So just to do an initial inspection of all these basins is going to be complex in itself.
So, I mean, do we start with the initial inspection, and from that, build a priority list? And a priority list might not be dealing with, like, Pete's is probably a pristine example of what they should be. That would be low on the priority list, and deal with the ones that have been, let's say the maintenance has been deferred for 25 years, and that needs to be done. Can we get into those with a simple right of entry? I mean,
If, I believe you could for the purposes of inspection, but again, that I need clarification from town council. Because of the way they were set up, they are private property, and that would be using public funds for private property. Whereas within the bylaw, it was an actual change of the townsfolk, so to speak, so that gave us a different legal right.
well, how long is it gonna take to get that answer?
Before the
A few
next
weeks,
meeting.
but, so the other,
Okay.
the other question that comes into play here a little bit too is, okay, so let's say we say let's walk before we run. I think the reason the last bylaw package that was presented came to be in its complexity to detail, including how we're going to charge, is once we inspect and we find deficiencies, does it just fall off the edge of the table and we know we have problems, but we have nothing left for us to act or do? And that's where the full bylaw was put together that said, when we get in there and we do the inspection and then we find situations, we're going to obviously bring it to the attention of the homeowners association, the neighbors, the people, whatever they can do to remediate or make it right. That is the least possible way for them to do it expense-wise. That makes sense. Okay, write that in. And then we continued on with, and then what about the difficult ones that there's outflow that we need to be checking because there might be some things going on with it, or there's flooding downstream and there's imminent danger to neighbors or the rest of the neighborhoods around. What are we going to do when they all go, hey, glad you showed us that, but we're not going to do anything? So that first bylaw had all these things thought through. So in future conversations, I think we have to continue to not just go, okay, let's take it to step one, which is inspect. And we really don't know what we're going to do after step one, because we'll think about that when we get there. That's kind of what gets us in trouble in different areas in town, is we have things that we put in place, but when it comes for the enforcement, it goes like that. And then the town is stuck trying to figure out, how do we get out of the mud here and get something to happen? So what we really want to do at the end of our process, which I really, really welcome your attendance and participation, let's work it through. We won't solve it tonight. Let's see if we can figure something out, but we really need to probably think it all the way through to what would make sense for everybody. Go to this neighborhood, 8 people surround it, we're coming in. We go to this one, and it's on my property, and I say, that's nice you want to come here, but I'm not signing that thing. What's the enforcement mechanism? What's going to be? John Mayberry, you need to let us into that detention basin because it needs our attention. We're doing it on our nickel, but you have to let us drive through there, and I don't care if you're having an open house, a party, a graduation. My job is to make safe water. So we've got to think all that stuff through so that we really get everybody, or the majority of everybody, feeling good about it.
Right, not everybody might not be as cordial as you three guys sitting in the room here when you start driving through their yard.
One of the things that I really talked about early on in the bylaw process to get things going is assuming that the homeowners are obligated to maintain these according to the deed restriction that they've got on there. It was to see if we could get the bylaw passed so we could get access to the property, so we could inspect the property, so we could come up with an assessment of what has to be done and try and get a value of it. Give the homeowners in there, working with them, not against them, working with them, provide information, you know, with what the cost is to be, what has to be done, and ways to accomplish it. I think we talked about, you know, certain things that they would be able to do, but the bigger stuff, you talked about, you know, DPW has the equipment to be able to come and do it. If there's some cases where that has to be done, and your argument has been, you can't get anybody to agree to anything, because they're not gonna, the homeowners associations just don't work, was that if we came up with a figure that needed to be done, that we, through the town and the assessors and the Board of Taxation, be able to, in the bylaw, get the work done using a bid process, so you can't say it was, you know, so you gave it to somebody's brother, where you take the lowest bid, you put out for a bid, you get a lowest bid, the work is done, and that the homeowners that are in that subdivision are charged an assessment, a betterment or an assessment on their taxes to make sure that, you know, it gets done initially. And then after that, they can maintain them, go along with whatever has to be done, or agree that they don't want to do it because they can't get together. And so there's an annual fee to maintain them to a minimum standard, because that's all you have to do after it's done initially. And again, it can just be put on the tax roll, and they would pay it on the taxes, because if you're saying they can't get together to pool the money, they would pay for it under their equal share of either by the size of the property. There's some formula to come up with who's going to pay for what.
Or we still walk down that path of, you know, understanding that the retention basins are not, I mean, it's because of the groundwater that impacts others. I mean, where the retention basin is on down the street from me is owned by a Florida, the people sold their property for whatever reason to a Florida LLC. So I want to have a meeting with the owner of that property to say, you have that over there. I have to say, hey, you, the manager down in Florida, the LLC, we need to talk about this type of thing. And more people, as they're getting older, whatever, are moving properties into other entities and leasing from themselves.
How are we going to get a right of?
But there's still.
How are we going to get on there?
But there's somebody paying the taxes on that.
There's one thing about having meetings. It's another thing to send a certified letter to the attorney that notarized the deed and say, could you please have this entity approve this right-of-way agreement, as opposed to saying, we're going to hold our annual meeting and picnic over at my house on such and such a day, everybody gather, and then have no show, not even have a bloody quorum. So that's the challenge on a practical level, is that since the only purpose to associate is to maintain a retention basin, not to agree on common plowing, not to agree on lawn mowing, not to agree on any of that stuff like a condominium does, the object, you're not going to get a lot, you're going to get a bunch of no quorums.
Right, but to Danny's point, right?
But I still think, again, the same principle as he pointed out about having street lights on a street, and we're all paying for it, a pumping station that breaks down on one end of East Long Meadow that we're all paying for, helping people who go to school when we don't have any school kids because of all this. We're not talking, at the end of the day, big dollars to basically have it done right, as opposed, and to be able to take action and to try to do it, undo it, do stuff, have the association or force a quick meeting, do something to create legal right-of-way. That's what future meetings are about. We'll get town council involved,
right,
if he's available, and try to work on something. But what's happening is you're gonna call for meetings and not have quorums, because either people have second shift jobs working something else, and you're gonna say, well, I'm sorry, I'm not available, or I'm going here or there or whatever. So you're gonna say, okay, we don't have a quorum. You'd be like if two of you guys could make it, but one of you makes it, you can't make decisions. You need 2 out of 3. The same thing. So if now you start having small subdivisions like mine with just 5 people or 4, and 2 people don't show up, and I'm supposed to make budget decisions on who to hire because the people from Florida aren't sending someone up here to discuss, or the person across the street is at a vacation home or somewhere else, you don't have quorums, nothing gets done. And that's just that. The reality is, in this type of events, people don't associate.
All right, we got 63 of these things, right? Roughly.
50 in residential.
Right. So if each subdivision, go back to your thought, if each subdivision wants out of these things, they turn them over to the town in a good condition that's approved by Ty and Bond. And then that would fast track certain ones like Pete was saying. We as the town would assume them in good working condition and simply have to move forward with the maintenance of them. Other ones that haven't been touched in 20 years may have to get that group of people together and say, if you want out of it, you want to wash your hands of it, you need to bring it up to a standard that's acceptable by somebody like Ty and Bond that meets all the criteria, and then we take it over from a maintenance point.
For a fee.
Pretty much like,
For a fee.
pretty much like streets.
Then we're gonna have to get that $50,000 a year to maintain it in our budget.
I think the fee comes from the homeowner. And they've got the obligation in their deed to be responsible for it. So if they can't get their homeowners together, association together, then, you know, we end up having to go in there and we assume the responsibility through the bylaw to go into that property, to assess it, to do whatever it needs to bring it up to the standard, and then assess the people that are in that subdivision, an assessment.
Like a stormwater, so much like we send them a water bill or a sewer bill, we would send a stormwater maintenance bill
Correct.
for like $200 a year or
Correct.
something.
Whatever it is, might be 50, it might be 250, it depends on how big it is and how many people are in it and what needs to be done.
But even if you go that,
Go ahead. Go
sorry, Ron. Even if you go that route, there's still a Mass General Law that says if you're like a mini, and maybe Tracy knows about it, there's a Mass General Law that says we can just come back to you and ask for a rebate for processing that stormwater. And I'm sorry I don't have the exact chapter and verse, but it exists. And I mean, not to illustrate something, but we could just get elected on the board and say, okay, you're all set, you know?
The what?
In other words, we could be the ones approving the rebate. If you look at the Mass General Law regarding stormwater, they call them mini wastewater and stormwater treatment facilities. It says your authority that has public works, it could be the DPW, it could be the Board of Selectmen. In this case, because we have a DPW, you oversee the water rates for water and sewer. You would be overseeing the sewer. Stormwater rates. And then you would be the board that would approve an abate or a rebate because we're processing stormwater. And all that I'm saying is, I mean, you could initially decline it, but eventually the town residents could just run for your office, your positions.
Oh,
and
come on, Peter.
vote themselves.
Then you
Yeah,
would
so we
then you would
decline
have
right
then
now.
you would have a conflict of
They make
interest,
you laugh.
Pete.
That's right. But how do you know that? There's
Because
all kinds-
you would be a resident that had one of these.
So anyways, you just kind of
I
attacked.
didn't say I was gonna run.
You just kind of attacked the three of us. We're not going to do that, okay? So
No.
Yeah. So
But I'm just saying that because Tom mentioned that we would have a fee, and I don't know how to be more clear. It's like, there is no fee from us. I mean, we want it to be absorbed,
Get a tape change.
so.
So-
And I'm sorry, Ron wants to.
No, that's fine.
So the only other thing I'll address on the streetlights, because you said it 2 or 3 times, that was Proposition 2.5. We haven't put any streetlights in anybody's subdivision since Proposition 2.5. We haven't added a streetlight to anywhere in town. If a streetlight's been moved, it's been taken from one place and put in another for public safety. So this whole thing about streetlights, we don't have any in our neighborhood. That was voted in, Prop 2.5. No more streetlights go in. Subdivisions need to put in their own streetlights. So
We're still having,
lamps in their front
the
yards.
common denominator is this. It's either public safety or public safety. And the public safety is good water for the public. Good water so that the Mill Rivers of the world, the ponds we have in East Long Meadow are clean and taken care of.
Right, so
what
Don,
is it?
one of the things for clean water is we can discover the outflow from retention detention basins, and I don't know if I'm using the right term, downstream from those retention detention basins, if there's a perceived issue. Then right now, to preserve that water, we can go ahead and go after the homeowners association, the private owner, whatever, as a town, if there's a muni reason to do it.
It's
But
still-
other than that, Right now, by repealing the bylaw, you've made it pretty easy for the town of East Long Meadow right now. They're not ours.
Well,
They're yours.
What
We're
saying
trying to
is-
come to a place where we can get it to
Mr. Burak
happen.
pointed out, it's going to have to be taken care of sometime. Whether it's now, 14, 15, 16, whatever year. What we're saying is, we feel it can be handled with a budget item that can have it done correctly. We still keep focusing back on the association that's created to maintain these things, and we're still not letting go of the fact that it doesn't work.
One more question.
Please.
You want 50,000?
Well,
Tom,
that's a
100,000,
freaking-
whatever number, just pick
It
a
could be
number.
10,000, it could be whatever.
It's
We
gonna be
want
more
the
than 50.
future-
All right, say
It ain't gonna be 10.
All right.
We want the future subdivisions to have to pay in
Right,
to this kitty.
right.
But we're okay in this room saying, but the previous ones who already are in,
Are exempt.
we were exempt somehow. We don't want to pay even 1,000 or 2,000 per retention detention basin to kick this off. We want you to go to general fund, and then those who enter from here forward, that's a community? So I'm just asking that
Yeah,
question.
I'm just
Did you have a
saying is
comment?
that to help the community is that we can find if it's allowed through the bonding process, to be able to, again, provided it's legal and it's appropriate, as opposed to a developer saying, no, that's not appropriate. I'm just suggesting that as a way for a developer to say in the future, we will contribute to that. Just like we have developers contributing, like we
I
have.
like the idea, don't misunderstand.
No,
I
no,
like
like
the
I
idea.
have
I'm not,
developers saying, you must put trees on my street, or else we're not gonna accept it.
Mhm.
You know, these type of things.
I understand.
I mean, that's, I say is analogous. We're not talking, honestly.
But we could
big
kick it
dollars.
off, could we not, with the existing ones to all put in a
Well,
little
the problem-
bit?
The problem with the existing one is still based
propose-
on associations that don't associate. There's still, we've already had 25 years, the expression is the water's already gone through the dam, pardon the pun, I guess, in this case. We found that the methodology that's been used doesn't work. We have a better chance of people reading the Microsoft checkbox when they install new software to read that whole
I got it.
thing without checking it, than associating for the purposes. I read the Spanish edition, no. For purposes of associating. It doesn't happen, it hasn't happened, you can't legislate that. The only way people associate, if there's a day-to-day benefit of my lawn is getting mowed, my driveway's getting plowed, I have
All right.
that kind of thing. That's
Okay.
it. Because that's real to them, not
We're
this thing.
going over the same thing.
Okay, we got
over and
5
over.
minutes on the tape, and I'd just like to just respond to that quickly. And that is, you're talking about going forward with new subdivisions. They've got to pay into the fund. I mean, they've got to be maintained, and either they've got to do away with that policy and do away with catch basins. It's not going to happen
We
because
can
of the Clean
invite
Water Act.
George or somebody from, we can invite someone from conservation or planning to get involved in this thing and have it an even more comprehensive plan.
I think that's right.
I think, we can have them.
Yeah, because I mean, I agree with your analogy of like, we can't have all micro villages, but like, how can you guys be exempt in the next one subdivision that comes in
It's not a question of
there?
what's exempt. I'm saying is that if that subdivision, if somebody were expanding a subdivision or doing something, we should address it. What I wanted back in the day.
We're past
I
that,
know,
Don.
is to
We've already
collect-
talked about
collect
that.
money and have DPW say that.
We gotta
You
go
can ask
forward.
I can't ask Pete Lean, but you can ask any of the predecessors you had. I brought that up, but it was like, we don't want it. We don't want to get involved. But my point is, it's not like I'm suggesting something that it wasn't suggested by me in the past. But what we can do is this, is take care of what we have, admit that it doesn't work, let's move forward with it, and in moving forward, come up with a strategy to mitigate any type of impact it might have on the town.
But you're saying that it doesn't work, so going forward, the people that are not going to form an association, how do we address those people? You're saying that the developer should put up a large sum of money that will maintain it for a period of time,
Whatever
10
we-
years or whatever.
and create
I mean, that's a lot of money, and then,
written easements to
and
the
then,
town.
and
to
then
get
who's gonna continue to maintain it?
Well, hopefully, I said if the money's an appropriate amount of money, we can put into some type of investment account, we'll deal with that, where at least it can generate some funds to help maintain it.
I think
I'm
what
just
we're-
talking in the future of creating an easement, but again, that's all subject to discussion. We're gonna have like the minds of other boards discuss it.
So, I think we had a good act. Did you have anything you wanted to add? Or? Okay, so we had a good, active discussion. I think it was awesome. I heard some things. It's going to take some soak time on my part to. We will let for sure the two of you know. Is that adequate? Seeing as there's nobody else here, or Ron, you want to? Yeah, you give us email or addresses.
Who's the point guy, Don?
Pete? It
I
does.
mind it, yeah.
All right, so we'll make sure, Pete, for sure that you know if we're going to talk about it actively, other than a possible conversation at a board meeting, which you probably spend lots of time enjoying those in your off time. But if we're going to talk about it substantially, we will invite you guys so we can keep this going. In between, Sean's our guy. So if you guys want to keep having dialogue, Tracy and Sean can certainly help you, with that part of it.
And so we don't have to worry about this annual town meeting, right, John, at this point?
Nay.
This is the
Nay.
before-
Nay.
the local
Nay.
town-
Nay, 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 nay.
Nay.
You don't need to worry about this town meeting,
Okay.
all right?
One question, like you're saying 50 grand, like you're gonna vote on that every year?
No.
Or you're gonna
No.
establish a
I talked to
budget?
town council, our moderator, and he said, let's try to come up with an idea, working with DPW, so it's not an annual vote every year, that's gonna become part of the budget.
All right,
So we know what we're talking about.
other work to work on, we know what we're
All right.
talking about. I'll entertain,
A motion to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I think it was productive. It was